Hey there. In this video, I am going to sort of welcome you to coding. This is designed for folks who have never seen a line of code before, never written a line of code before. I'm going to sort of talk you through the fundamentals of what coding is, and then by the end of the video, you will write your first line of code ever. I'm going to sort of walk through this tutorial that I've already written, but I'm just going to kind of talk through it kind of casually. So before we get started, I want to kind of ask a few questions in sort of in order. So first, and it's going to sound maybe a little goofy, especially if you've lived in the world. But I want to start with, what is a computer? And, I encourage you to maybe think about that yourself and think about what your definition of a computer is. But my sort of definition of it, maybe I'll start with the history, actually. So, back in the day, computers were these huge, scary things that like took up an entire room and could do math, and that's it. Maybe I shouldn't say that's it, because they were revolutionary and all that, and math is important. But there were these huge things that took up entire rooms and were very specifically designed for one goal, one task, and that was what they were. Over time, they got more general and got smaller, and the sort of emergence of personal computers meant that anyone could use one. So rather than it taking up an entire room, it would fit on a desk. And so, the personal computer sort of revolution of the 80s and into the 90s sort of transformed what a computer was. And now you likely have about 5 computers like within arm's reach of you. So your phone is a computer, your laptop is a computer. If you have like a smartwatch or something, that's a computer, like a fitness tracker. If you have, I don't know, like a PlayStation or an Xbox, something like that. Even your TV at this point is a computer. Your car probably contains a computer. So they're all over the place, and these are all computers. So, um, now that we have kind of defined computer, I want to define program. So you probably use computers all the time, and you probably use programs all the time. And again, maybe think for a second about what you think a program is. But the way I'll think about it is, a program is something that tells your computer what to do. So, for example, the like YouTube app that you're using right now, or the web page that you are looking at right now, or the browser that you're using right now, that's a program. That program is telling your computer what to do. It's telling your computer to play a video, to show the frames of the video on screen. It's telling it to play the sound out of your speakers or in your headphones or whatever. It's telling your computer what to do. There are a bunch of different programs, just like there are a bunch of different kinds of computers, but you might think of, your web browser is one that we talked about. Something like Spotify, if you have like the Spotify application or app, I will be brave and open it. We'll see how this goes. Um, Spotify is a program that is telling, in this case, it's telling my computer to, show this advertisement to me, and to show these, playlists and podcasts to me. And if I click around, then, the Spotify program here says, hey, the user clicked this playlist. Now show that playlist and show the songs in that playlist. And if I click on one, it'll play the song, and that's Spotify, the program, telling the computer to do something, to play the song in that case. So I like to think of a program as something that tells the computer what to do. Okay, so with that in mind, the next question I would like to present to you is, what is code? You've probably heard that word before, but I want you to kind of think about it. Maybe don't look down at the at the written tutorial, but think about it. What is code? And the way I think about it is, so a program tells a computer what to do, but a computer isn't smart enough to understand like a human language. Like I can't in English tell my computer, "Hey computer, play this song." There are actually programs that will get pretty close to that. If you have like Alexa or whatever, you can, but that's actually the program telling the computer what to do. And at its core, the computer itself doesn't understand English, at least not yet. Um, so the programs have to use a computer language to tell the computer what to do. And that is code. That language is code. So there are actually a bunch of different coding languages, just like there are a bunch of different human languages. There are a bunch of different coding languages, and we will talk about a few of them, but we'll get there when we get there. So that's code. And finally, what is coding? Coding is the act of writing code. So if you are coding, then you are likely writing code. You are writing code. And that's what you'll be learning how to do. You'll be learning how to code. Okay, so I'm going to maybe get away from this for a second and talk about, there are a bunch of different languages that we could learn. And there are a bunch of tutorials for a bunch of different languages that you could learn. And depending on your goal, you might learn, a different language. If you want to learn, I don't know, how to I didn't prepare this part of it at all. If you want to learn how to, I don't know, like make a server, then you might learn Java. If you want to learn how to like control your lights on like a Raspberry Pi or something, then you would use whatever language Raspberry Pi uses. I actually don't know. But you could look that up, and then that would tell you what language to learn. The lens that I would like to talk about this stuff through is something called creative coding. And creative coding is, there are a couple different definitions, but the way I like to think about creative coding is it's just making stuff with code. It's making stuff that looks cool or does something interesting with code. So there are a bunch of different examples of this. If you have like been to a concert and the like behind the artist is like some trippy visualization that kind of syncs up to the music, that's one example of creative coding. There's also like a bunch of digital art. So someone like, I don't know, Aaron Koblin is one of my go-to creative coding artists. Um, he uses code to make art, and so the artifact of it, or the thing that is created, is this interesting creative output that kind of looks cool, maybe makes you think, maybe is a little bit more artistic, that kind of thing. There are a bunch of other examples. George Provenza is another one. um, he is, I should have looked up his webpage. There he is. He's another digital artist that I really respect. He's got a lot of cool projects that he does with code, and that's creative coding. A bunch more. Bees and Bombs is another one. Now I'm just kind of name dropping. It's not that kind of bees or bombs. It's this dude, Dave White. He posts a lot of kind of cool trippy visualizations that will likely break YouTube compression, but he uses code to create something interesting and artistic. And then maybe I'll mention just one more, and that's Saskia. She is another digital artist that actually posts a new piece of art every single day, which is really really interesting to just kind of watch. So again, it's art through the language of code. So that's creative coding. And so now that we have a goal, we can think to ourselves, okay, what language should I learn? And here I am on the Wikipedia page for creative coding. And here are a bunch of different languages we could use. And if you were on your own, you might just start by clicking through and trying each one out and seeing which one you like the best, and going with that. But since you are watching this video and you presumably want me to sort of guide you through it, I will say that the one that I am going to use throughout this series is P5JS. There are a bunch of reasons for that, but just from this Wikipedia article, what I'll point out is one of the really powerful things about P5 is that you can do it all directly in your browser. So for most of these other things, you have to download something, install them, and it'll maybe be a little different depending on what your operating system is, and it can be kind of tricky. P5 works directly in your browser, which is why it's one of the reasons that I really love it, and I think it's a good thing to start with. So I am going to, maybe I'll go back to search engine and I'll just type in p5.js. That's the name of the language that we're going to be using, and I'll start out just by maybe reading through the homepage, and there are a bunch of things I really like here. It's all about sort of the idea of a sketch where instead of planning ahead and knowing exactly what the output is going to be, just like you get out like a pen and a piece of paper, you can just doodle and you can kind of sketch and see where the sketch takes you. And I really like that kind of metaphor and that kind of approach to coding. Um, I also really love their sort of community, and it's a bunch of folks who um, care about the same kinds of things. You might think that code is a bunch of ones and zeros, and it's historically it's got a pretty high barrier to entry. And P5 is all about kind of breaking those preconceptions down and being open to everyone, and especially being open to folks who are just starting out or folks who are kind of new to code. And I really love that they kind of wear that on their sleeve. So anyway, this is P5. It's a language, or we'll get into exactly what it is. But for now, I'm going to call it a language, a coding language. And from their homepage, we can go to their editor. So click this editor button over here. And this takes you to the P5 editor. And I want to maybe pause here and just talk about some of the things that are on the screen. So when you write code, you are generally going to be using a code editor. And there are a bunch of different editors, and which one you use kind of depends on what kind of code you're writing. But you can kind of think of it as the same way that you would use, like, I don't know, like a Google Doc or maybe like Microsoft Word or something like that to write like a paper. If you're like in school and you're writing a paper, you might use one of those tools to actually type the words. You wouldn't use those things to write code. You'd use a similar idea, an editor, but for code rather than for like formatted text. So a code editor gets you things like, helpful highlighting and coloring of the code, and can help you run the code and encounter errors. And we'll get into all of that as we go on. But for now, I just want to point out that this is the P5JS code editor, which lets you write P5JS code. So before we do anything, I want to maybe start by reading the code that's already there. So P5, or the P5 editor, gives you some starter code. It's the code that's already over here in the editor. And even if you've never seen code before, you've never written a line of code before, you've never read a line of code before, another thing I kind of like about P5 is I bet that you can kind of guess at what this does. So right now the code is sort of divided into two sections, I'll call them. There's like a setup section and a draw section, okay? And then inside the setup section, there's this create canvas thing with two numbers next to it. And then there's a background. And then in the draw section, there's this background thing with another number. And, what does that do? And I encourage you to maybe like pause and think for a second and come up with your own guess. Like, what does this do? What do you think will happen? And, as I read through it, I know what it does, so this is kind of cheating. But, this create canvas, it probably creates like a drawing canvas or something. And then this background probably draws like a background. And since it's like one number, then it's probably like a color or one color or something. Um, and this act of like reading through code is super important. So I like suggest getting kind of into that habit. But without further ado, I will say go click this run button up here. So in this editor, we have this like predefined code or this default code. And now let's run that code by clicking this play button here. And ta-da, what that does is run the code, which gives you this output on the right. So the P5 editor is on the left, the sort of code part, the editing part, and then on the right is the output of that code. And so you see that the output of this code is a canvas, which is 400 by 400 pixels, and then a background with 220. And we'll talk about what that 220 means, I think, in the next lesson. But for now, it's a background color. So now we know how to sort of load the P5 editor and run the code. So the next thing that you'll learn about is writing code. And we'll talk in a ton of detail about exactly how to, write code and how to figure out what code to write. But for now, what I want you to do is just kind of follow along with me, and you can, type this out in your own editor as I go. So what I'm going to do is put my cursor like sort of like on line 6, like to the right of that last semicolon. And so you see the like little blinky thing, little blinky cursor right there. And I'm going to hit enter or return a couple times, give myself some white space. So this gives me room to sort of write my own code. And for now, what I want you to do is write the keyword circle and then an opening parenthesis. And then inside of those parentheses, I want you to type 3 numbers. So first it's going to be 200 and then a comma and then a 200 again and then another comma and then let's say, 300. And then make sure that your parentheses are closed. So you have an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. And then after the closing parenthesis, a semicolon. And again, we'll talk about exactly what all of that stuff means in the next video. But for now, I just want you to, write your first line of code. So when you have that, hit this run button again. And there you go. You have written your first line of code. You are now drawing a circle to the P5JS sketch canvas. And from here, we'll talk more about exactly what that was, exactly how that code works, and most importantly, how to find what other things you can do in code. But for now, you wrote your first line of code. So again, congratulations. Give yourselves a round of applause. Pat yourself on the back. You are officially a coder. The last thing I want to mention maybe is if you haven't already, then you probably want to sign up for P5. It's free, but this will let you save your code so that you can then share it or come back to it later. So however you want to do it, either setting up a username with an email or logging in with GitHub or Google or whatever, all good. But I would suggest signing up, and that way you can save your code and share it with the world. Okay, so I think that's about as far as I wanted to go. Let me double check. Yeah, cool. So maybe I'll leave you with some of this. We've talked about what a computer is, what a program is. I'd encourage you to, over the next few days, kind of think about that and what programs do you use in your everyday life? What kinds of things do they tell the computer what to do? What kinds of programming languages have you maybe heard of just like in pop culture? And, as you are starting out in your coding journey, what types of things are you hoping to do with code? Okay, so that is it for Welcome to Coding. So, welcome to coding, and I will see you in the next video where we will learn more about exactly what just happened and how to find more information.